You're listening to the Geriatric Mamas Podcast with Jessica Raziri
and Sonia Tapley.
Hey mamas, today we have expert guest Stephanie Thrower with us. Stephanie is a psychologist who helps new mamas balance work and life with counseling and career assessment intensives. We had Stephanie on a little over a year ago to talk about the 5th trimester, and we learned so much from her about giving ourselves grace as we re-enter the world of our careers after maternity leave. So we're very excited to have her back for this very important chat.
Mamas, I love a full and silky texture in my face creams because they feel so healing and comforting to my dry, thirsty skin. Well, the award-winning, best-selling, lightweight moisture release water cream by Honest Beauty called Hydrogel Cream refreshes and cools my skin on application and leaves a dewy finish. As I mentioned on the Hope episode, Kathy's Story, I love mixing hydrogel cream into my foundation for a healthy looking glow. Infused with jojoba and squalene to help hydrate and soothe thirst, plus 2 sizes of hyaluronic acid to help soften and firm, reducing the appearance of fine lines. Honest Beauty's Hydrogel Cream will provide a beautiful glow for very dry skin. We're leaving the link below in our show notes. Drink up, mamas.
Mamas, I want to have rosé all day, have fun, and let myself live a little without feeling drunk or feeling hungover the next day. So I treat myself by adding rosé tinted glasses to my sparkling water or lemonade. If you're like me and you're looking for calm daytime energy while feeling alert, present, and uplifted because, well, you know, you're a mom now. Adaptogenic and antioxidant-rich ingredients make rosé tinted glasses from Apothecary great for those battling feelings of stress and looking to curb signs of aging with improved skin tone and moisture. Its tincture format makes it easy to drop wherever you're making it. It's perfect for busy working moms, busy stay-at-home moms who are looking for mood and energy support on the go. We're leaving the link below and in our show notes. So cheers, mamas.
Long time no see.
Hello.
Congratulations, by the way.
Oh my gosh, thank you very much. Our baby boy is here.
So exciting. So you have a girl and a boy now, right?
I have a girl and I have a boy and I have a boy. All made in the geriatric era. So
I love that. Well, shall we get started? Oh, have you ever heard of the book, The Whole Brain Child?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, you have?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Have you implemented the Whole Brain Child book into your life, or is it?
I mean, I think all parenting books, not all, some really good ones are aspirational.
Yes. Yes.
And I think we all have, even Dr. Becky has such great advice, right? And she does a good job being like, you think I can do this at home? You know,
No.
80% of the time, no. But I think I think the Whole Brain Child just helps us understand. We really struggle, I think, to understand development in our culture.
Right.
And I don't think I was raised with the mindset of oh, you have all these developmental periods. I feel like it was you're 7, you should know better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And this kind of explains a little bit why, just a lot of the books do.
Yeah. So it's I think that there's some things that we, all these tidbits we try to bring into the house. Mm-hmm. But then I do think that we have to build our own philosophy. And so I think sometimes we feel like we're just borrowing from these experts and we don't know what our voice is.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know if
definitely customizing it to every single child is really important. That's for sure.
Well, and the dyad, who we are too. So it's not just how our kid is, but seeing with my different kids, I just interact with them so differently.
Right.
Because they have such different personalities. You know? It's really easy and simple being a parent.
So easy.
So easy.
I only ever needed one book to get me through.
Well, I think this is a good segue. So today we have expert guest Stephanie Thrower with us. Welcome back, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Stephanie is a psychologist who helps new mamas balance work and life with counseling and career assessment intensives. We had Stephanie on a little over a year ago to talk about the fifth trimester, and we learned so much from her about giving ourselves grace as we re enter the world of our careers after maternity leave. So we're very, very, very excited to have her back for an extremely important chat.
Yes. Welcome, Stephanie. We're very excited to have you back on to talk about working and becoming a parent later in life, work-life balance, and pivoting your career while expanding your family.
Awesome.
All right, well, I will go ahead and get us started with some questions. So the first question we have for you, what unique advantages do you see in becoming a parent after establishing your career?
We're going to start with the advantages, right? Because it's so easy to start talking about what's hard.
Yeah, so let's start on a positive note, and then we'll just kind of go into our way down, and then we'll end this episode on a complete low point.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and it is February, right? We're like, oh. Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of advantages. I think there's advantages to being a parent later in life and having your identity, your career identity already. I think there's something about like it can be jarring, but there are benefits to like coming into being to doing all the parent stuff, but knowing you also have this other well-established identity within your career. And that can feel grounding for some people, and to know you have a lot of skills and a lot of experience. And I also think you're not trying to prove two things at once, although I think I want to say that's true, right? Like you're not just trying to prove like, oh, I've got to get through and I'm really early in my career and I have to prove that I can do A, B, C, D while also having a new baby. So there can be some kind of like scaffolding. Like for me, I was really wanting to graduate with my PhD before I started having kids, which, just put like everything a little bit backward. But it was so hard to be in the proving ground of all that education and also think about the proving ground of motherhood. And so I think that there are some definite benefits.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Definitely things that we don't think about because we had our kids later in life and that's just how it happened. But to think about it from that perspective, definitely crazy to think about trying to prove myself in the career that I had, which definitely there was that time period for sure.
Yeah.
While also becoming a new mom. All right. So what is the biggest myth about pivoting your career while expanding your family?
I think just that it can't happen. I think I find when I work with people, there's this fear of change because you're going through so much change anyways. And it's sort of like, well, when everything is settled with my kids, that's when I'll make a pivot.
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of a setup for burnout and depression sometimes. When you're just like, okay, well, I'm stuck I'm stuck in this space. There's no way to pivot and too much change is bad. And I feel like there's I think the more options we put on the table, the more our anxiety gets like the pressure valve gets released. It's like, could I change a little bit of this? Could I change the role? Could I give feedback to my supervisor that I don't like ABC? Could I go to a different company? And so I think that there's just like trying to not be so rigid in our minds about what the different pivots look like. Because I think sometimes it's like, well, it's only a bakery. That's it. Because, versus like there's actually a lot of different moves we can make. But sometimes when we're in the thick of burnout and overwhelm, it's like, it's so hard to identify those little pieces.
Right. Exactly.
Why do you think so many parents hesitate to make a career change even when they're feeling stuck or misaligned?
I think that, I feel like you know this answer too. Like it's just scary, right? Your job means something so different once you become a parent. And it's not just the money thing. It's also like, I think particularly being a woman, it's like, what do I want my kids to see me doing? So there's like all of these like layers of pressure about what it means to be a woman. And I think another myth that comes up too is like, if I take a pause, I will have wasted my career, or I'll have wasted all that time I did before. If I take any kind of step back, there's this piece of like, oh, that's wasted time or energy or effort. And I'm like, it's never wasted. You always have grown those skills. You will take those with you everywhere.
Right.
But there's this piece of like just imagining all your colleagues like going forward and doing all these like fancy things, and you're kind of being left in the dust, I guess.
Yeah, right.
So I think
never know what they're actually going through. But yes, exactly.
I think a lot of times too, people view time as an investment. And so it's like the reason why people stay in relationships for so long that aren't good, that are toxic, and the reason why they stay at jobs for as long as they do, even though they're so unhappy, is because they're like, well, I've been here for X amount of years. And so it's an investment. I've invested this much time into this thing. So I need to get something in return to my investment. And so it's like, I think shifting it, like you said, it was like, well, you are getting something out of that investment. You built skills. It's an experience. You're a different person. You're forever changed today because of all of that. And so take that and now apply it to something different and grow.
Totally. And what you described, I'm going to be like nerdy here. In social psychology, they call that the sunk cost fallacy. And so it's actually studied particularly in gambling. So when people feel like they have invested time at a certain slot machine, they're like, it's got, it's
like bound to happen.
I've been here 8 hours.
Gosh.
I'm going to get, but literally we know that that's not true, because each time you go, it doesn't like add up. It's like a whole new set of chance the same time. But yeah, we think in our minds, like, I've sunk my time into this. And I think also people assume that their companies are more loyal to them than they are.
Yeah. Which is so disheartening when you think about how quickly like you're replaceable. Like, you've given up so much for this company, but like they don't really care about you.
Yeah, and we're moving into an era where like it's just more competitive, thinking about like what's your value, right? And so I do a lot of work with people to try to kind of chip some of that apart and help them build their story about what they really care about, which could be connected to a company and a system.
Right.
Or it doesn't. I don't know,
Right. How does becoming a parent later in life change the way we think about work, ambition, and success?
I think that when you are having babies in your late 30s and 40s, you're not necessarily potentially at a proving time in your career. You are at some of like the most intense performance that you're expecting from yourself, right? It's like, it's not the learning time anymore. So when I find some of the moms that I work with who are in that older phase, right? Like there's a little bit more like, I come back from maternity leave, I need to be on it. My brain needs to be together. And I think there's also a little bit of you're much more aware of the clock of like your working years and where you want to be in your 50s, right? And so I think that sometimes that ramp feels shortened for people. And I think that makes sense. And I also think that we should just kind of check where we can challenge that, because our work is, I think in the next 5 years, our work is going to change dramatically because of the way that, the extent to which we implement AI stuff as fast as it's being built, right? And so I think we should try to be like, do some of these stories really apply to work nowadays? Most people I work with, it's so funny. I can't tell if I'm just like influencing everyone or it's actually just most people I work with have started little businesses, because it's like so available. So I think that that's it. It's like the time crunch starts to get into our mind, and then it feels like a super competitor to like, how am I going to be there for my kids when I want to be there? You know?
Yeah, definitely. The flexibility of the schedule as we're moving into that last part of work for our lives,
How do you help women move past the I should have figured this out already mindset? I'm so guilty of this. I place the blame on myself all the time. Like, oh, I don't have my shit together yet.
Like, how do you move past that?
I know, like, when have we ever not felt that way? I feel like I just wondered too, because I didn't really grow up with the internet, of course, not in the same way, right? I feel like I wonder if younger generations are going to continue to feel that way because there's so much available information to be like, it's out there. I should have known that these things are, I should know these things. But what I find with career work is when I do like an assessment with someone, it can take some digging and some time. And it also takes it takes a little bit of time to like move the shoulds aside so we can see what they want to do, because a lot of times we don't give ourselves permission for what we want to do in work. And I think people are afraid that they're lazy. They're afraid that they're not smart enough, all the things, right? But I think as women, we often don't have great work mentorship. I don't know, like unless it's like this formal, like you were in school and you had like an advisor that did this thing, right? But most of the time, I think a lot of people, it's their bosses, which there's something limited to like your boss being your mentor.
Right. It's kind of biased.
Yeah.
Biased.
It is, totally. Yeah.
I hear that for sure. I think a lot of times it comes from, family members who, are coming from completely different walks of life in terms of work or just completely different generations, obviously. So, yeah, you're right. There it kind of is a lack of mentorship with career, unless it's also like I'm lucky enough to have Jess in our group of friends, but not every woman has, that kind of support group. Why do you think women often feel they have to choose between career growth and family expansion?
Because they do. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, because it's true. Because that's an actual fact. No, just
exactly. Yeah, I think that like for me, I own a business. I do therapy. I was like, okay, I can literally see the financial cost of taking a maternity leave, right? And it's just like it's an interesting decision to be like weighing these things. And we do that in a lot of different areas when we're thinking about family expansion, right? Like if we're going to do IVF or we're going to do all these, it's hard when a number is there.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of competing forces of like, do I have the bandwidth to do both? So I think that, I guess I think that there's a reality to it, but is it all or nothing? Absolutely not. Like, I think everyone has unique resources available to them. Like some have partners who really step up and are able to or parents or family or friends that can like help support any component. Or I've heard, not as commonly, right? Like workplaces saying like, listen, this is the best time in your kid's life. Like go. Don't stay for this stupid meeting. It doesn't matter at all. Like do what you need to do. Be with your family. So
yeah. What money myths tend to hold parents back from pursuing a career that fits their values?
I think that money healing is like everyone has some kind of money little T trauma. Like we all have something to do in terms of healing our energy around money and do I have enough or because sometimes it just feels like it's never enough. And when I start to ask people about like what money they need, they feel shifty, not that they don't trust me, but they just don't know, and it's like scary to look at the numbers. So I think that's like a big question. But I feel like sometimes when someone is so miserable in work and they're like, I will only leave if the salary is exactly this or more, there's a little bit of like challenging. Some can be done like gently of if you made this much less, but you had these roles or this responsibility off of you and you actually slept at night, would your quality of life be better? Or would you even have time to think of the Etsy shop you want to build, right? Like, so I think that there's these spaces where I find with the people I work with who build little businesses on the side, and maybe they want to grow it huge, maybe they don't, but there's a pressure release of having something that's their own I think it like actually helps tap into some creativity and like shake it around a little bit so that they don't feel like, because anxiety is always going to give us a narrow path. There's only one path to solving this, and anxiety loves all of our money stuff, you know.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. So can you explain why starting over in a career doesn't have to mean a financial setback? You kind of started alluding to this a little bit, but I'd be interested to see what your thoughts are on that.
I think that, like, again, we put on the table all the different options. I think that when a lot of women and moms who are older who are like, I want to focus, I want to have more time with my kids, and I want to build a business where I like actually have more control of time. And that's more available than it's ever been because of technology, right? Like definitely was not available at this, like when we were kids. Like it's just so much easier to start that. I think for a lot of people, it's handy to have a side hustle for a little while as a leverage point to creating goals for, if I have this much money coming in, I can leave my work. Or I think work is becoming more amendable. W-2s are like thinking, okay, like we could do part-time with this person, and how do we manage that? So I think that there's ways to like, for it not to be all or nothing. And then I think even in field, like if you're wanting to switch fields, there's still quite a bit of room. We don't have to take it super fast. We can do a lot of research in advance to understand, like, is this really true? Like, would I really have to take a pay cut if I wanted to start doing this part of the work? And anxiety initially is like, absolutely I would, and the world would fall apart.
Yeah.
And then we start to like dig into facts, and I find that to be really helpful. I've had people like switch into different fields and then actually realize that they enjoyed the stuff they did before. There were just problems that needed to be addressed. And so just having the flexibility gives us better perspective, I think.
Yeah.
Hey mamas, are you someone who's 35 plus and struggled with fertility, endured a miscarriage, experienced heartbreaking fostering or adoption challenges, or were perhaps flat out told by a doctor that you will never conceive naturally, and despite the odds eventually found your happy ending by becoming a mama?
Send us your story at geriatricmamas.com. We would love to feature your journey to motherhood on a future Geriatric Mamas episode.
Can you explain what a career assessment intensive is and how it helps parents find clarity and balance in their careers?
Yeah. So I was first trained in career assessments when I worked at the VA, and it was actually it was geared around working with veterans who were coming off of active duty or in recovery, and they needed to find like, what's the next step, right? And like experience in the military is so defined and rigid. So like assessment was a handy tool to kind of use a bunch of different types of questions. It's not like an aptitude test like you took in high school, which a lot of people are like, I should be a project manager. So we would do, I started learning how to do these assessments. And I find with a lot of my clients, I will start to like add some of the surveys and some of the data into mostly helping me help them better to understand like, okay, this is kind of like your work personality, or this is like your tolerance for risk, you know? And when I think about all of this, like when I like summarize all the findings, it helps us understand maybe a little bit faster a roadmap to like what's next, you know? Like sometimes the findings show like discrepancies, being like, you're really strong in this area and you're really interested in this area, but sometimes like jobs that fit in those roles, there's not a lot of them available, right? And so we kind of get into the nuances of why sometimes they struggle. And then the intensive part is I've oftentimes will have, over the years, I've been doing them across weeks or months or years, like doing little bits of this. And intensives have become more popular in the therapy world for trauma treatment and couples therapy, of just like, let's get to the answer. Let's heal these things. Let's like duke it out in couples therapy. I don't know.
Time is of the essence.
We don't have time to keep coming back. And I think I think it's a neat model to try to do in the career assessment space. So
Do you have an example of how someone has used a career intensive to completely transform their career and family life?
Yes, I do. I do. I do. It's funny. I think the first person that's coming to mind, I have used the assessment twice. And so when you go and do like psychological assessments, oftentimes you don't really do them that frequently because you kind of you're like, this is what your IQ is, or, these other pieces about how your brain function. You might follow up and you do that with kids, but like in career, it's cool because we did like a piece of the assessment, and initially I'd be like, what are you passionate about, or what are you proud of? And she would just look at me and be like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Particularly like, what are you proud of? Like that was a thing that was hard, because there's like emotional material to that. But I have seen, like, working with this woman who's a mother, just her ability to tap into her intuition has made decisions much easier. And so, like, going from being a teacher to starting to learn code, to starting to be a data engineer, to that, to like doing all these differences and then like different pieces. It's like we understand why the path makes sense because of the assessment that we did, right? Because we've seen the strengths and interests, as opposed to, I think people can feel without mentorship, like, why are you doing so many random things? When I see the results, I'm like, these aren't random. They make sense from your history and from everything that we talked about. The other thing we do sometimes is, you talked about parents. Like, I feel like we would talk about, like, often when I talk with people, I talk about like what their parents' work did and how that influenced them. And I think that is an important story to like bring to life because it does influence us.
Yeah, definitely. My grandmother was a cosmetologist on one side, and my grandmother on the other side owned a dance school. And I definitely was following more in, their footsteps as far as like the glamour and the beauty aspect, because there's a lot of, I think you and I talked about this on our little chat, I have a lot of tomboys in my family, but those two aren't. So I kind of like gravitated towards their careers and like their paths sort of in a lot of ways. So I definitely get that.
Yeah. And I think it's like helpful to like give it air and talk about it. Because like, who do we talk about that with? Like whoever asks us, like, how did your mom's work or your dad's work or your grandparents' work like influence what you chose to do? And sometimes it's like, I'm not going to do that, right?
I know, absolutely not. Yeah. That's one thing we don't have to worry about because that box has already been checked. So
yeah. What is the biggest mindset shift that you think parents over 36 need to make when thinking about their careers?
A lot of times I appreciate people wanting to coast through certain periods of their kids' development. And I think that sometimes sets people up to get really bummed out and to feel underfulfilled in their work. And then kind of get stuck in that space. Like, I feel like if work supports them during a particularly tough time, they might stay indebted to the role or their company as opposed to actually thinking about what they want to do next. So I think that like, if you're saying like, okay, I'm just going to coast, it depends on the person. But if you are like a type A, always growing, always learning, always challenging yourself, I don't think that coasting thing works very well. I think there's like this piece, and I also feel like sometimes people feel like they're sacrificing something for motherhood when it might not be necessary. So it's like, yes, there's a way like to not necessarily increase demands, but a lot of times we want to feel inspired in some kind of way in our work, because work at its best can actually help us practice our purpose, which sounds kind of cheesy, but like we can kind of see like, is this it? Is this it?
Right.
At its worst, it can just make us miserable.
Yeah.
So what's possible for women when they get clear on their career vision while expanding their family?
I feel like what I've seen is they don't even know what's possible. And I don't even. That's like the coolest part, is like once we start kind of breaking down and listening to their career intuition, which is like a cheesy term, but it feels like so much what we find. I feel like unexpected things come in their paths. And that's like kind of the coolest part about work is being like, oh my gosh, I didn't eat. Like, yes, you accomplished your goal, but then like all these other opportunities started to come. Yeah, I don't know. Does that make sense? Sounds kind of cheesy, but
So this has been super enlightening, and I know that this is a new program. It's not like new, but you've been kind of working on it and you're kind of getting it out there now. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about what we're talking about when we talk about the career assessment intensives?
totally. Yeah. I think that, I mean, self promotion is like never fun, right? But I think even if you don't work with me, like learn about what a career assessment is, because I think that more women need to know what tools are out there for us, because sometimes when we think about career coaching, it feels really like, I don't know, like suits and blazers and like positive thinking. And I think
Yeah.
it's definitely, we can do professional development outside of our workspace that's actually like really, I don't know, really moving. And so, yeah, so what I'm offering now is it's a career assessment intensive. So I do like an intake that's like 90 minutes. Then we do where I get your full career story. Then we do like a deep dive for 3 hours with a break. And then we do like an out processing meeting to check up and see like how things go, and we'll create a plan, a roadmap of everything from the findings that we have from those 3 hours, so that we would schedule probably that third meeting like, I don't know, 3 weeks or a month away to follow up and see, was this were these realistic goals? Did what did you make of our work together? Yeah, and that's the typical format. I'm also trying to develop something that might be like more of like a journal. So if you didn't have time or money to sit with me, then there's like a way to answer some of these questions and to do a little bit of a dive to get a sense of like a taste of what the work is like. So to TBD, it's coming.
Right.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All exciting.
So the hopes in that like 2 to 3 weeks after you're done with the immediate intensive is that they're going to kind of make a decision on where they want to start looking for their new career, applying or developing their business, or
Yeah, it's exactly like having, I mean, I think that the people I work with vary a little bit. Some people love to have a plan and are like, okay, the next week and next 4 weeks I'm doing all these things. And then other people, we might realize like that homework is too intense and too overwhelming. And so I think for people, it's like some of the goals might be, I'm going to talk to my partner about this change, or I'm going to make sure. So some of the things that not necessarily about being productive, but still move the needle of like, how do I make this change? Yeah. So those kind of recommendations are going to vary person by person.
right.
But
Like, do I need to take this course? Do I need this, certificate? Or is this something where I can just start applying tomorrow? But do I have to redo my resume? Those kinds of things.
Totally. Do I need help on interviews? How could I prep for interviews? Who are my people? Like, so identifying like all the different kinds of supports that you might need depending on the direction that feels right.
Yeah. And Stephanie, just given, your example of where you had the teacher and they went from being a teacher to kind of deciding that they wanted to go into, was it like data developer?
Yeah, like a data engineer. So like, so from going to like high school teaching to working in coding and getting that certificate. But then like there's been quite a journey along the way that I've noticed. Yeah.
And it shows too, like your depth of knowledge as far as what's out there for careers. And I'm sure you research by person, but just your dedication to really helping them dig and find that right path for them is amazing. So
thank you.
Definitely. Well, thank you again so much for being with us. We appreciate all of your insight into this really important topic, and we look forward to having you back again at some point to dive into more. This is such a huge topic for us, especially for geriatric mamas. Like, this age group is for sure a lot of times very career driven, as we know. So
Totally. And there's like a risk of, there's not a risk, but I think that like some people are at this age and wanting to take a pause, and it feels really financially scary. And I don't take that lightly, but I think how can we give people breathing room in their work? It's so important because like, I always thought it was so cheap, like the season you're in, I would cringe when good friend would be like, yeah, but that's just not your season right now. And I'm just
we're not naturally that woo woo, but since becoming moms, that's kind of a pivot we've taken. So because it's real, it's a season.
It is. It totally is. I think that there's a way to think of our work, and there's a way to get like really negative about what that could mean for us in our future and our retirement. Right. But then there's also this piece of, okay, like, how do we be optimistic? How do we understand where all the opportunity, let's be abundance mindset and think, okay, there is a company that is not a jerk and can hire me. Right. They have seen it happen.
Right. They understand that we're hardworking moms. So, Stephanie, listeners can follow you on Instagram at Thrower Consulting and Therapy. And they can find you on your website, which is the same, throwerconsultingandtherapy.com.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. Be sure to tune in next week. Your support is keeping the podcast going. You can help by following, subscribing, rating, reviewing, and especially by telling a friend to listen anywhere or watch on YouTube. For more info, you can check out our website at geriatricmamas.com. You can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at geriatric_mamas, on YouTube at Geriatric Mamas, Twitter at Geriatric Mamas, and follow our group page on Facebook, Geriatric Mamas. If you have a topic idea that you'd like us to discuss, or interested in being a guest, or simply have a funny geriatric story to tell, you can go to geriatricmamas.com and hit be a guest or send us your story.
We made it.
We did it.
We did it.
Bye-bye.